I'm really excited today because I'm here with someone who's a little different than our normal interviewee, who's often a woman that's in a B2B sales role or sales leadership role. But this totally ties into what we need to talk about. And my guest is Dia Bondi. Dia is a communications catalyst helping leaders, founders, and professionals speak powerfully to advance their goals. She's led workshops for innovative companies like Salesforce and Google's X team and Dropbox, and she's helped the city of Rio de Janeiro to secure their 2016 Summer Olympics. Dia's been covered in CNBC's Make It, Forbes, Fast Company. She works with a small amount of private clients. And I just want to welcome you here today, Dia. It's really great to see you.
I'm excited to be here. It's so fun to think about some of these projects that I've worked on, these strategic projects that are like Rio de Janeiro was like a $7 billion decision, but we can bring the same moxie to those kinds of projects as we can to the asks that we have in front of our own careers, in front of our own clients. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter, big or small, the stakes feel high for all of us.
I feel like it would be a whole episode just to talk about Rio, but that's very cool. It's very interesting. What prompted me to reach out to you was that you have uh, a, a fairly new book out, and your book is called Ask Like an Auctioneer. There are so many funny parallels between you and I because I became a fundraising auctioneer probably about 2015 or so, and I did it for about 5 years. It was amazing. I learned so much and I saw the parallels, and I love that you wrote a book about it. Tell us a little bit about what prompted you to do the book, and do you still auctioneer for charities periodically?
I do periodically. I've always done it. I call it my impact hobby. It was a chance to put on a gown and just do this
Yes.
fun little challenge. And yeah, what prompted me to write this book was about 25, 30 auctions into doing this new impact hobby. I realized that, oh my gosh, what I was learning on stage was so applicable to how we think about asking for more and getting it and using asking as a success strategy in our careers and businesses. And it's so fun to talk to you as someone who's also been in front of a room asking people for money.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And we don't have to all be drinking in order to make it up. That's the challenge with the fundraising
It's
auctioneer,
true.
the
It's true.
auctioneering profession, is it? A lot of behavior that goes on that's counterproductive to buying and supporting a nonprofit.
In some ways, you do. I haven't been directly heckled, but you do have to do a little crowd management for sure.
I just want to tell this really quick story that my very first live event was a golf tournament. And
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of golf tournament auctions are outdoors in a tent, and they're very noisy. People have been golfing all day. They're clearly they've been served too much in a lot of cases. And we had a noisy, great big tent. And so the brother of the guy who was doing the fundraising got up on a chair and yelled to everyone to shut up, like in his loudest voice.
Yeah, that's tough.
And
I have, and how
it
did it work?
I
No,
think
it did not work.
set a terrible tone. Uh,
I have to say, so knowing that this is women in sales, I'm expecting we might have a mixed gendered audience, but maybe a lot of women in the room. I have multiple times. In fact, last year I did one for a school in my neighborhood, and I had the one of the dads that was an MC. The room was not focusing on the auction. I was just not even. I think I was just one lot. It was our warm up lot. Who cares? There's $200 worth of cupcakes or something that were getting
yeah.
delivered to a table. And he had the gall to walk up on stage to try to take my mic from me. Here, let me take care of this for you, honey. And I was like, whatever it is that you're going to do is not going to be any better. And in fact, might be a liability compared to what I'm going to do. I managed to quiet the room enough. We raised a lot of money, but there was a lot of shushing the room before you ask for money is not a great way to go. Telling everyone to shut up so that you can raise money is not a great way to grease the skids. And I literally had to like white knuckle my mic so he wouldn't take it from me because I was like, look, you don't know how this works. Like I need to quiet the room and stay and rapport with them at the same time.
Yes. And what I learned was never give anyone the mic unless they're part of the program and they've not been drinking. So
Good. Yeah, good combo.
Yeah, that's interesting. But so some of the great lessons that are in the book, we could go on for hours, but I think some of them are thinking really about what you want, what it is that you want,
Mhm.
and what can you get? I don't know. What are some of the things that I know you have principles from auctioneering? And so how do you think of how the book is laid out?
So I think about what you want. So let's just parse out what you want. There's what you want in a particular ask, but there's also understanding what you want even above that, that your ask is going to help you get. Not that you want more money in and of itself, like how much money do you want? And that's the ask. It's to say, what is that money that you might be asking for helping you achieve? And so to me, that's the first, what is it that you want? I want to secure my first $1 million client. I want to elevate my profile in the organization such that I have more visibility and that can support the ask that I'm going to make later for the promotion that I'm looking for. I want to be the face of this new product launch. I want to have access to a network I wouldn't otherwise want so that I can. What is the big want? And then how does the ask you're making fit into that? And then how do you maximize the potential of the ask that you're making? So I hear people say sometimes I host book salons in women's homes, but I have a signature keynote and a workshop for this stuff. And people say, we want you to ask for, Dia wants you to ask for what you want, not just what you think you can get. And that's actually not true.
Mm.
I want you to ask for so much that you think you're going to get rejected and then have a conversation with the person across the table and settle on a number that is a perfect equilibrium between the maximum they're willing to say yes to and the maximum ask that you can make. And that might be actually a couple of digits above what you thought you wanted.
Yeah. And you say that most people inside us, we don't ask enough. We don't ask for enough typically, especially women.
You just said 2 things, and I don't know if you meant that on purpose or not, but you said we don't ask enough and we don't ask for enough. And my answer is yes for both of those. Yes, you'll hear me say, and I think I write it in the book, that asking is one of the most overlooked and actively avoided success strategies out there. And when you go to make an ask, I want you to ask for more so you can get more. Now, that recognizes that we do make asks. We know we have to fundraise. We know we have to send the proposal. We know we have to, there are asks that we do make. I'm not saying you don't ask. I'm saying often between those sort of ordained and expected ask moments, we walk past a lot of asks we could make to help us get to our goals faster.
Yeah. And you have some good success stories in your book about, and I'm going to focus on women since this is conversations with women in sales. And I know you do a lot of great stuff with women, not exclusively for women, neither do I, but women who find their voice, women who make the big ask that they
Mhm.
didn't think they would. And I know one of them ended up making a donation in your name because
She
you helped her
did.
to get a raise.
Yeah, she got a signing bonus for the first time, and it made it possible for her to get her own solo apartment. So, getting a solo apartment, not having housemates anymore, that's the what do I want? And then the ask she made was bigger than what she even thought she wanted, but what she thought was going to get a no. And she got a yes to more than she would have if she had designed in order to get a yes. And that afforded her to get the big want in place to get her own apartment. Yeah, that was when she sent me that email, I was like, that's what it is. For folks who are listening, just know that when I was doing that, when it hit me, oh, I want what I'm learning in these auctions to be, I want other women that I work with out in the wild to learn this stuff because it's so useful to how we think about setting up and delivering a better, more fruitful ask. But I don't want to build an auctioneering school for girls. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not teaching you how to be an auctioneer. I'm teaching you how to ask like one with a mental framework. And I was like, okay, Dia, but why? And there's nothing gendered necessarily in the
Right.
content itself, but it is to say if I'm gonna make a sharp knife, I wanna put it in the hands of folks who need it most. And of course, we wanna close wage gaps, we wanna close leadership gaps, we wanna close basically the goal of the book is to help 1 million women ask for more and get it and use asking as a success strategy. Why? So we can put more money and decision-making power in the hands of women so we can change everything for all of us. That's what it's about. And whether that is more cash in your pocket for folks who are listening, or if it's about gaining more authority in your domain, if it is about growing your visibility so that you get the credit that you want or the roles that you want, if it's about having more balance in your life, meaning bringing more into alignment what you're doing in your role in sales and who you are, great. All of those count.
Or getting your partner to do more at home so that you can do more of your role at work, right? Yeah. It could be so many different things.
So
And
many.
yeah, and what's interesting in my world of B2B sales is that women are underrepresented at every level, which I'm sure doesn't surprise you. You're in Silicon Valley, so you see the whole tech bro thing, like you know about all that. And women are not, the higher up we go, the less women we see in leadership and executive leadership in the C-suite. So it's very important that we all know as women some of the fundamentals of, for example, if a woman is looking to get a job in sales, you have to be ready to ask for more because if you don't, they're going to think that it's like a fundamental of selling is that you have to be willing to look at all sorts of different options and opportunities. And if I start with something I really want to do, like I want my boss's job, for example, a lot of women are not going to have that conversation, but men do it all the time. And
Yeah.
in their second week at work.
And I think it's important to recognize that, look, I love bringing this content to sales teams. I love bringing my leadership voice content to sales teams. And where I do see, I did a keynote for a sales kickoff last year, about 400 people in the room. And they're probably 10% were women as in sales leadership roles and sales roles. Where there is a density of women, I see as like sales enablement, learning and development, those enablement roles, which I think is also reflected. Everybody listening, I could be wrong, but I think is reflected at the executive level as well, that we do have more women in executive leadership. They're often in enablement roles. They're in the COO roles or in the CHRO roles and less in chief revenue officer,
Yep.
CEO roles. I think you're right. And if I could just tell a little story, because I run into a lot of folks who, in my workshops and keynotes who are perfectly comfortable making a big ask on behalf of their organization. And then when they go make a big ask for themselves, it feels really different. And fair enough, fair enough. And they think it's going to ruin the deal. And I love this little anecdote. I mean, this is an anecdote, but there's a thing I talk about in the book called signaling, which is, look, you can go in and make a big ask around a role that you want, a kind of impact you want to have in an organization, the kind of client you want to be going after. That's a level up in sales, isn't it? I don't want to go for these smaller clients. I want to go fishing for the big fish, right? That when we make those big asks while we're in rapport with whoever's across from the metaphorical table from us, we're signaling where we see ourselves in the future. And I gave this talk at an offsite for a bunch of marketers, actually, at a big tech company, one that you carry around in your hand. And the woman that brought me in said, "Oh, yes, that's so true. A friend of mine, I think I tell a story in the book, a friend of mine, first time CEO, and she made a huge ask, and it was like way out of what the board was going to say yes to. But she had established her sort of authority and rapport and connection and made such a strong case that it was not a disqualifying event. Instead, it helped them see, oh, I see where this woman sees herself. So let's have a conversation about no, not that today, but what is the pathway we can create where that can be true for you in 2 years and 5 years and whatever it is. And so in that way, it was a positive signaling to her audience that I see a future where I am big, and can I be big here? And if I'm big, I'm going to help this place be big too.
Yeah. I like that so much. And that makes it less about me. I find a lot of women will say, oh, but I could never ask that or I could never do it. You're doing it for the greater cause and you can do that. It's
You
just there are women that won't post on LinkedIn. They're very busy. First of all, a lot of us are very busy, but also there are people that will say, I don't really have anything interesting to say. And what I tell them is that you have a story and there are other women up and coming in sales, again, in my little niche, where they need to hear your voice. And so it's all important. And whether it's verbally, whether we're auctioneering or whether we're influencing others with words or in pen and hand or verbally, it's all very important to share those.
I have a little two-prong sort of thought around the idea of being able to make asks on the behalf of something else. Like, we can
Yeah.
advocate for something else as a way to for the greater good. That's a story that we're told a lot, like it's supposed to be not about ourselves, you know? And sometimes I'm like, "Go ahead and let it be about yourself. Go
Yeah.
ahead." It's
Yeah.
okay to say, "I wanna be rich." It's okay to say, "I wanna have that title." Like, we get kind of ambition shamed a little bit. If it's not altruistic, then it's not okay. This last year, a woman named Nigeri Kennedy, she's a pitcher for in the sport of softball. She played for Stanford, and last year, she went into something called the portal, which is like a place where you go to say, I'm open to playing for another campus. And she ended up securing a ceiling breaking deal with, I think she's at Texas Tech now. She throws faster than anybody like ever in her sport for that was worth over $1 million. That had never been done before an NIL deal. Sorry for everyone for talking sports. I have a daughter in
Oh,
the sport. But there in the response on a lot of the social channels where her achievements were posted, people were like, how dare she leave Stanford and just be after the money? Who does she think she is? What, the money wasn't good enough? And I thought that's where I'm like, look, it's perfectly okay for a lot of male athletes to go out and secure that bag. And the moment a woman wants to secure that bag, we've got a problem with it. What is that? So I just want to give women a space to like, if you want to be rich, do it.
do
Do
it.
it. Now at the same time, Lori, you got me going. Lori got me going, everyone. At the same time, if you feel held back by making a big ask on your own behalf, you're warming up to that for yourself, just saying out loud that you want to be a seven-figure sales professional, that feels like a mouthful for you. I don't know if that's a thing, Lori. Is that a thing? Is that a
Sure.
thing? Okay, let's imagine it's a thing. And that feels like, how dare I say that? And you need to make big asks to help you get there, even with a goal that you're not ready to say out loud to the world. You can use this idea I learned in auctioneering. Lori, you probably remember this, or I don't know. Is that when I went to auctioneering school, I learned that we're not the buyer or the seller. We're an agent for the seller. That's what
Right.
we are. So when I think about women making asks, you can borrow that idea and be an agent for your purpose. When I started auctioneering, I realized I'm an agent for the seller, but more important, I'm an agent for the purpose that this nonprofit is here to do in the world. I'm here to help fundraise on behalf of that thing. Okay. So you can look at your own life, your own career, and say, okay, it freaks me out, the idea of asking for, help me, Lori, up my commissions by 40%, like
Yeah.
the portion of whatever I
Sure.
get for all the sales I do. Okay, fine. And that feels there. You can be like, all right, but what is that increase in commission going to do? Oh, that is going to accelerate my kid's 529 by 40% this year. Oh, that's going to make it possible for me to pay off that second mortgage that we had to use last year for X, Y, and Z. Oh, that's going to, do you see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Like, when you get connected to the why of your ask, it sometimes can grease the skids and help you go ahead and make it.
Yeah. And the sad thing is that I didn't know this lesson when I was in my early 20s when I left being a teacher because I was a single mom and I got into sales. I didn't know I could negotiate my salary. And
Mhm.
so all the men did, and I didn't. I was all set because I was excited about commission, that I would be paid for the services
Effort,
and
yeah.
products that I generated and the effort. Yeah. And so that part was really great. But once you don't negotiate, it perpetuates the next role as time goes on. It just, you get less and less over time. And so instead of having a gigantic nest egg, you end up with a smaller amount. And that's the importance of
Over
starting.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, starting soon and understanding compound interest is also another thing that's really important. That's critical for people to know. And the worst thing someone can do is say no. And we know that no's in auctioneering, that's when we know we're done, right? Is it
So perfect.
no.
That's what it means to ask like an auctioneer. We can't sell anything, Lori, you and I, when we're asking. We can't sell anything until we get a no, because the no lets us know we've maximized the potential of the ask. For us, it's actually great news. So I want people on this call to go, I'm going to go ahead and ask for an invitation to that senior level sales meeting because I want to be a senior director in 18 months and I need exposure to those kinds of conversations, see what that kind of leadership looks like. I'm going to make that ask instead of getting access to the notes. I'm gonna ask to sit in and shadow that meeting. And that makes my stomach turn upside down. But if they say, no, not that, but how about this and give you the next best thing, it might be more than just having gotten sent the notes at the end. Like we have to see that, yeah, it can be like, oh, I gotta know that means that I know exactly where the actual ceiling is.
Yeah. And my friend, I don't know if you know my friend Andrea Walls, but she wrote a book called Go for No.
I don't know her, but she did a review of my book on LinkedIn, I think,
Uh,
last year.
Andrea's
Yeah,
amazing. And we talk about that, about how getting a quick no is the second best thing to getting a yes. In business, if I get a quick no, I don't have to wait around and keep trying and following up. If I get a quick no, I'm happy. The slow no's are what really kill you. And with auctioneering, a lot of times it takes more than we're going to double check, right? Are you sure? Is anyone else? And
100%.
yeah, we're not just, or as people will say in business, they're like, oh, I don't think she's interested because Dia would have called me back if she was. We have all these stories that we have in our head. And I don't know until Dia tells me no. I asked Dia to be on the show. She said yes. And so I don't know that until I ask and until
Now,
I hear back.
on the flip side, did you ever do this, Lori, when you were auctioneering, where you might be having a bidding war between somebody at 5,000 and somebody at 55, and maybe you started at 2,000 or 1,000 or whatever, and the person that is at the lower at the $5,000 bid and somebody's got it at 55, you're going to go back to that person at 5,000 and say, okay, are you in at six? Are you in at 6,000? Are you in? Are
Sure.
you in? Are you in? And they'll just stare back at you.
Yeah,
And you have to, and they're
I
not
love
giving you
that.
a sign either way. What did you
Love
do
it.
in those situations? Do you remember?
I laughed and I said, oh, I, I'm not sure if that's a yes or a no. I'd make fun. I always had fun in what I did. And then eventually they're like,
Yeah, they give you the head shake.
usually a
Right.
no. Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm moving really quickly, I'll do the same thing. Is that a yes or no, sir? And if they don't give me a clear answer, I will literally say, I'll take your silence as a no. Moving on. Anyone in at 5,500? Like,
Yeah.
I get to decide when I take the silence I'm met with as a no because it's my show. And as a professional, as a sales lead, you get to also decide how much silence is enough for you to go, that's a no, we're going to close that deal. Like, you get to do that. It doesn't mean it won't come back later, but all of these hooks stuck in your mouth on all these open deals that just drag on, because also, guess what? You don't like getting a no, but people don't like saying no either.
Yeah. They hate it.
They don't like it. It can feel like a confrontation for them. The other half, I work with women in my workshops, and on the one half, they're like, how do I ask so big that I might get rejected? And then the other half of the conversations are, oh my gosh, I have to tell this person no. How am I possibly going to do that? So it's hard on either side. So just recognize that sometimes the ghostings you get are just people not having the courage to make a decision, not having the courage to say no because that feels like a confrontation. They don't want to disappoint you. And you get to go, hey, like they've said we haven't heard back in too long. We're going to call this one a no. I'm taking
Yeah.
their silence as a no and move on.
And don't take it personally. I have family members that ghost me. Shouldn't admit that probably, but it's true. And sometimes they just don't, you realize people just don't have something to say back. And
Yeah.
so with prospects, I tend to find something more interesting to share with them. So I put it on me like, oh, let me think of some. And then if I hear something about their industry or their company or an
Yes.
award or person, or I'll bring that up. And then they're like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I owe you a call. I owe you a conversation. Now, so I want to jump to something else while we're here because I love this show called The Irrational with Jesse Martin. I don't know if you've seen
I
it.
don't know it.
Oh my goodness, you gotta see because you write about how people are irrational. You would love this show because he's a professor and he proves all the time about how irrational people are.
Yes.
And so how do you factor that into to the conversation?
Oh my gosh, people are so irrational. And I know people are listening like, that's not true for us. We make data-driven decisions around here. I'm like, but do you? Great. Okay, good for you. But the organization might, but people are irrational. So I saw this play out. The cool thing about auctioneering is that you get to see like a transaction play out in 90 seconds.
Yeah.
What usually for many of us might happen, I don't know what your sales cycles look like, but mine in the speaking business and in the professional development space, it's long. So to see him play out so tightly is interesting. And what I saw was every time we'd plan for what we thought something should sell for, it never did. Sold a one-night camping trip. I tell this in my TEDx, night camping trip at auction for $55,000. And we were like, we thought it was gonna
Camping trip.
a camping trip. Granted, it was a glamping trip,
Yeah.
but 55,000 and we doubled it. Somebody else in the room said, "Me too." For me, I was like, "Oh my gosh, so irrational." And then it works the other way too, where my client will say, "Oh, this piece of art is it's $10,000 and it'll sell for 4,000." And I'm like, equally irrational on the other side. So
Yeah.
how it plays out here is that if we can kind of embrace that idea and say, I don't know, if you don't like they are irrational, you can use their rationale for what they'll say yes or no to is not your rationale for what they'll say yes or no to. And so you can, when you just let yourself be free of trying to decide for them what they'll say yes or no to, it can again grease the gears to go ahead and make that bigger ask and just find out.
Yeah, and that's I think of it as things are not always logical. Say it's like being rational or irrational. That the easiest transaction it gets all bogged down, and then the strangest one you never think would happen
So
happen. So you
yes.
need to be open and ready.
And curious.
Yeah,
Like,
curious.
oh, I wonder how this one's gonna go. You
Yeah,
know?
and not just assume this happened the last time.
Yeah.
Get all those ideas out of your head. I think that is a really good move for people in sales.
Yeah.
Uh, one of the last thing I wanna talk about is that price is a measure of value, not worth.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
What do you think about you say value is contextual and it varies right, from person.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's look, I realize that price is a measure of value, not worth, is a valuable notion, and I saw it play out over all the time. My clients would say, my fundraising clients, these nonprofits, I do an art auction every year, and they're always like, "This piece of art is worth $7,500," and I'm like, "It's gonna be, it'll go for whatever someone in the room values it at." Like, for example, I will never carry a Birkin bag. I just won't.
Yeah,
It's just it's not what I value. Is that to say that a Birkin bag isn't worth 18 grand? Maybe it is to somebody else. So, in that way, we have to just so here's how I rephrase it. The price or what somebody will pay or do is a way to see what they value and how they value it, not a way for us to extract or define our own worth or worthiness because that's infinite.
right.
So this is useful to us when we go to make asks because it deloads the answer that we get. It deloads all the worth and worthiness discussion out of it and just makes it about what we're seeing somebody else values.
Yeah, and for up and coming entrepreneurs and professionals that are on their own like I am, that's important that you learn not to take it personally. Like it's not about me, it's about my offer. And that offer is worth what someone's willing to pay for it. And in an
Yes.
auction situation, it's what if two people are willing to pay for something that's worth even more typically. It's
Yep.
because as long as there are two people interested in something, the price will go up until it gets to that point where one person is willing to pay and the other person isn't. But yeah, it's we just get these ideas formed in our heads, I think. Oh, no one will ever pay that much for my services higher price or this software has more than our competitors. They're getting more deals because they're cheaper. It's just not the
It's
case.
contextual, and it's so contextual too because the value of something will go up to somebody depending on how desperate they are for it too. Like it's not just about the product and the customer, it's also about the context that we're both operating in and the pressures that may or may not put on both of us. I think also I like to separate the idea of value and worth too because in our culture right now we talk a lot about getting paid what you're worth, and I want everyone to get paid what they're worth. I want them to have the roles that they're worth. I want them to build businesses that they're worthy of, all of that stuff. But again, this notion of paid what you're worth, there's no way to answer what you're worth. What it's unanswerable and it loads up the ask with too much meaning about your worth and worthiness. So I actually want to chop that with some semantics and say, no, worth and worthiness infinite. What do they value? And to be fair, Lori, a big part of sales is there's so many important components that we bring to our sales relationships. rapport building skills and how good you are on the technical side of following up and all of that stuff, being able to tell a compelling, it doesn't get us off the hook for telling a compelling story, for anticipating their needs, for understanding their business or what their problem set is. It doesn't get us out of showing up to try to solve their problem. It doesn't get us out of all that stuff. And we can have an impact on the perceived value of something with all of those things. But ultimately, whether they say yes or no and at what price, it's not a comment on our worthiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Dio, how I know people can buy your book, Ask Like an Auctioneer. They can watch
Mhm.
your TED Talk, which I think is very one of the best ones I've seen. I
Oh,
really
thank you.
I've seen a lot of TED Talks, believe me. It was really good. It was very clear. It was very solid. Loved it a lot. How else can you have a limited amount of clients? You have some free things on your website. I noticed too.
I
Some
do, yes. So you can go in the show notes, you should get a welcome page from us at diabondi.com. I think it's diabondi.com/CWM, Conversations with Women. And you can find a free download in there that is a 6-step framework for developing a strategic ask. So if you're listening to this pod going, I want to try this stuff, but I don't really have an ask in front of me, that'll help you design one. So that's there. And you have everything you need to be able to get started on that. 2 is it's true, I only take, 3 coaching clients at a time, usually a senior leader and VC-backed founders, but folks can engage with me other ways. I run intensives in retreat format and virtual format. My retreat formats, you have to get on my list to have that offered to you because those are usually invite only and by application. So you can just do that at diabondi.com. And of course, if you run a sales team, I would love to come talk to your sales teams in my keynote and workshop format to help folks on your team, whether women or not, to make big, bold, strategic asks that help advance your business and help them be successful with you. Because the more successful your salespeople are, hopefully the longer they stay.
That's great. It's been so great speaking with you, and I love how our paths kind of cross.
I
And
know, that's really cool.
I will be a spotter at one of your auctions anytime. So
Back at you, Lori. Back at you. If you ever
that's
end up back
great.
in Seattle and you pick up one, I'll come up there and spot for you.
That sounds great. Dia Bondi, check her out, and we'll have all the ways to reach her. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.